Hello and greetings from the garden out here in Boulder. Quite a beautiful day. I just wanted to start, before I talk about this no self stuff, just take a minute to ground. So if you're feeling a bit off, or like I had to do some computer work earlier, and I just feel it like here. It's just this like kind of discord, dissonance in my frontal brain area. So I'm barefoot and partially bare-bodied, but just gonna put my feet and my hands in the ground. And if you have the chance to do this, go outside, join me. And if not, you can just visualize that you're putting your hands and feet in the ground. Sensing the wind, noticing sensations, not trying to be anything or do anything, and just noticing. Okay. Wow. So I wanted to talk about this concept of no self, no problem. And I originally saw this title as a book title. And I was in a bookstore and I saw the title and I was like, it's a brilliant title for a book. It's this little anecdote that holds so much, means so much, and so little. And honestly, if I had picked up the book and looked through it and there was nothing on the pages, I probably would have still bought it because I just thought the title was so brilliant. Now we're living in a time, and at least in the world I'm in, I'm interacting with a lot of people that are, in personal development and self-growth and self-help, and they're trying to learn a lot. And one thing I see is that without the perspective of the no self, no problem, no matter what you learn, no matter what you do, you're just probably constructing your ego and building it up more. So it might be great to try to feel more love and to try to be more empowered and do more plant-based healing work and all these things, but without a deeper understanding of what it's all for and who you really are, or rather who you are not, you'll probably end up back in the same space. So if you live near Colorado, June 30th, I'm hosting a cannabis journey, which I'm excited to do. I've been doing them for a while, and this is just kind of opening it up to more people. So if you're interested, click on the link below. You can learn more. I also have a mailing list where I share updates. You can click on the link below and sign up as well. But the reason I wanted to do this no self, no problem is because if you can understand this simple concept, it will just make your life make much more sense. I'm not here to say it's going to make it easier or it's going to make it more abundant or all these things, but those things tend to be a side effect of this process. And that's kind of the key piece here, is that going on the journey of discovering who you really are, which is beyond any scope of self, makes all the other things, they just kind of happen naturally. So to me, things are kind of backwards for most people. They want to have more love, they want to have more abundance, more freedom, more expression, so they do all these things, they learn all these practices to be that. And hey, big deal. And the practices, they might work really well and they might be helpful in moments, but what you're seeing more and more in this day and age, where there's a million different modalities and a million things you can do and try, is that people just get caught going from one thing to the next, kind of like diets. This kitty. Talk about, here's another self right here. Yes. So yeah, what happens is people get really caught into these spaces of thinking that they can do more, and they do something and they feel great, and oh my God, you got to try this thing. How many times have you heard somebody, try some new modality or practice, and they're like, oh my God, it changed my life. It's the greatest thing ever. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. Changed your life? Cool, let me do it. But what we're not seeing is that you're taking a snapshot of a person in a moment, and these patterns, these almost like deeper patterns that get played out are playing out, where it's like we want these quick fixes, and we do something, and it helps us, and we just want to share it and tell everybody. Or somebody tells us about a practice, and we're so excited because it helped them. So of course it's going to help us, and we just want to do it. We do it, and we do feel great, and then we start telling people. But what happens is at some point, the not so greatness starts to creep back in, and then we look for another practice. And so when people tell you about these things and they get excited about it, I like to think about it as taking a snapshot of someone's life in that moment. And those are the kind of things that people easily fall for, because nobody wants to, I say nobody, but most people don't want to hear that it's going to take them 5 years or 3 years or 10 years to get to where they want to get to. But from my experience, I've seen now that I went on that journey, and yeah, it took me a long time to get there. However, now that I'm here, it's like there were no shortcuts that I could have taken. And along the journey, it's not like you're spending 10 years and it's just suffering in hell. Like, no, along the journey, there's a lot of great moments. And eventually you arrive at this place where things just make sense. And you might think they make sense and you think you're done, and usually there's further to go, as I've realized many, many, many times. So I can't speak for anyone, and I can't even say to myself that I'm like done in the way that one might think, but I'm done with the seeking in the way that I used to seek. There's always going to be things to learn, things to shift and change and grow and all that. But the difference is, from the no self, no problem concept, is when you destroy the false self, then the problems go away. And let me be very clear, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you don't have any responsibilities. It doesn't mean you can just go around, do whatever you want and screw the consequences. It's actually quite the opposite. From the no-self perspective, you recognize what consequences are, you recognize what karma is, you recognize that everything has its own response. So if you do something that's not in alignment, you're going to know very quickly. I'm not just going to go out and do things that are harmful because I see and I've seen the patterns that they create. So from the no self, no problem, you're actually existing in this state of understanding and flow, and seeing how the order of the universe works. Because there is an order, there's a higher order to how everything works. And even though that might be sound belief based, it's just something that I've come to experience, come to see, and come to know. And the more I tune into that, the more it just becomes so obvious. So when you start going on this journey of no self, which I've talked about in other videos and talked about in the books that I give away, which are also in the link in my bio, there's an infinite different access points. You'll have to excuse me, I ate a snap pea earlier and I feel it kind of in my throat, the remnants of it. There are an infinite different amount of access points to get to this place of no self. You might experience it through just a deep sense of depression. You might experience it through some kind of medicine work. You might experience it through breathing, through whatever way that you get there. For me, it was started with a deep depression. When you find yourself there, it can be very lonely and confusing, because even though you've arrived at this incredible place, society doesn't reflect that back, because most of what we see externally are selves. At least that's how it shows up for us. Once you've gone through the no-self process, you realize that everybody is a no-self. They just don't necessarily realize it yet, and they're putting in all this energy and all this time to try to be this solid, specific person, which I get. I did that. And even now, still, from the no-self, you can slip into the self with awareness. I can slip into a character because being a character allows me a way to interact with people. Sometimes it's uncomfortable because I'm so aware of it, and other times I'm just like, whatever, it's fun, we're in a play. I'm an actor on stage, let me just be in this character and just embody this thing. So the ego is almost like the suit that we wear, and once you've taken the ego off, it's okay to slip it back on as a way to interact, because that's how the exchange seems to work in this world. But the difference is that once you've gone through this process of discovering the self, is that whenever you slip back on the self, it's not actually the self. You're not attached to that self, and that's the beauty, and that's where the no problem comes in. It doesn't mean we just exist as nothingness and have no ideas or beliefs or opinions, but rather there's a deeper part of us that knows that it's all made up. And from that knowing, we can actually exist and try on different things and see how it feels. From that knowing that there is no us, we don't have to be attached to how people respond to us in the same way. If somebody doesn't like us, we're not putting in all this time to get people to like us or to appreciate us, because ultimately it doesn't matter. Now, through this process, I've had times where I've seen myself and that there are these conditioned responses and there are these traumatic things that happened to me as a kid that play out and make me still, oh, I want to impress that person. But the difference is I can step out and say, oh, look what I'm doing. Did I notice that? It doesn't actually matter. And I saw myself slip into that conditioned character. So that's where a lot of the work happens, is when you wake up, you still have these conditioned beliefs and ideas physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually that sometimes will take over. And it's in being able to step outside of yourself and see that you can start to work on that and recognize those things and let it go. Not make it wrong, not make it right, but just recognize like, oh, I noticed that I still have this level of discomfort in this specific situation. Okay, well, from the no-self perspective, where is that coming from? And now I have this new lens to actually see what's going on, versus like trying to fit in with other people and just make sense of it in all these different types of ways. Because I'm sure you see it all the time. One book comes out and it's like, oh, this is the way, like it turns out that the breath is XYZ and everyone's all about it and excited. And then, you know, months later, years later, another book comes out that contradicts it. And it's like, no, actually, this is the truth. And it can just be very confusing. So at some point, it's like to say you need to tune into your own frequency, your own awareness to make sense of this. So if you're someone who's been struggling, or chances are you've gone through this process of realizing that you're no self, but you're resisting it. You're thinking something's wrong with me. I should be a self. Everywhere I look, people are solidifying themselves and trying to create better selves, more empowered, more excited selves, and they're building up the egoic constructs and yours keeps being broken down. So if that keeps happening, if you keep trying and trying and trying, recognize that there is no you that needs to be doing anything. And it's in that there's an immense amount of freedom, because you're not attached to just being this individualistic person. You're living in your fullness of existence, of your nothingness, of your everythingness. And in that state, it's pretty amazing. So I hope this maybe provided you with some sense of guidance. If you're ever just wanting to talk to someone, or just wanting some kind of support, send me an email at youenjoylifemusic@gmail.com. And we'll chat soon. Peace.